a few years ago, there was a lot going on in the EU because they had an old friend that left. That we need a moment of silence or celebration, depending on which side of the line you're on. But the UK leaving was a massive disruption to that market.
Welcome, Aaron, to another episode of the Decoding Cross-Border Ecommerce podcast. And look, we've done a lot of prep for this one, but before we get started, I'd love to. Do you have any entertainment for us, or do we just get going?
I want to start it with a question.
Okay.
If when you go into the bathroom, you're American, and when you come out, you're American, what are you while you're in the bathroom?
Well, I would have said American, but I don't know. What am I?
European.
Oh, the jokes are always the best when I'm not expecting them. And if they're good, that was good. I love it. Okay, so let's talk about the EU and the member states of the EU. We've talked we've had previous podcasts where we've talked about the UK, and we're just going to jumble all of these countries together, the EU, because it's all very similar. And yeah, let's get going. So, I mean, it's
why do we bundle it together? I mean, let's start there.
Yeah.
Like, shouldn't we just talk about each country individually? Like, what's the point in talking about them as one whole group?
Well, two things come to mind, and maybe you'll think of more than two. But one is they share the harmonized system, right? Mm-hmm. So the HS codes you classify to one, you've classified to them all. And then the other is with the tax remittance ability with IOSS allows you to really kind of treat them as kind of one general tax, VAT payment. What would you have said?
Yeah, I mean, it's all one trading block. Like,
right.
When you ship from France to Germany, there's no commercial invoice and customs clearance. It's all the customs clearance is happening when goods are coming into the EU or out of the EU. But within the EU, for the purposes of trade, it's almost like the U.S. I mean, it's not one country, but it's a group of countries that they banded together to create a union where goods can move freely within it. And so when you're selling cross-border and you're outside the EU, you really kind of treat the whole EU the same outside of, maybe some different tax rates and stuff. But yeah, it's really, there's one customs.
If you're going to go to one, go to them all, is what you're saying. Yeah. I would totally agree. And it's a big market too. So we've talked in the past, like Canada is about 29% of usually customers inside the United States. That's what I'm referencing right now. Canada is about 29% of their export business. And then a lot of these EU member states are, a pretty low percentage. Like a lot of them are under 1%. Some you have at about, France is like 2.7%, Germany's at 3.7%, but combined, it's 17.6%, which would actually make it the second biggest destination outside of Canada.
Yep. For U.S. merchants, but I would imagine shippers from the U.K. or other places is
UK is probably
one.
Yeah, probably number one. Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely.
Well, U.S. might be number one. I don't know, but it'd probably be
U.S. Yep. Yeah.
Be up there competing with the U.S. for sure.
And I mean, a lot of them speak English. Not all. There's different kind of percentages depending on the country. So, I mean, Hungary might only be 20%, but you have Ireland and everywhere else where 100% of the population, of course, is English speaking. That's why we speak English. Mm-hmm. But yeah, no, it's a great destination to tackle, and I think IOSS has actually made it easier. Would you agree?
Oh, totally.
Yeah. So I'm excited to talk about IOSS today and VAT. The VAT rates just in general on the low end, I think Luxembourg's like 17%, and then Hungary's the highest at like 27%. So they kind of go in between that range. Whenever I'm thinking about VAT in the EU, I'm usually thinking 20 to 21%, which is, where kind of a bulk of the VAT rates lie. But yeah, just depends on where you're going. Okay. So should we start with the IOSS? Where do you want to start today?
Yeah, let's talk a little bit about, let's talk about the size of it, just the GDP in general. I think you talk percentages, but it's a massive market. It's very developed.
Yep.
There's a lot of money there. Well, what did you say the combined GDP was for the entire EU?
17 trillion.
How does that compare globally?
Well, let's see.
I think
China, you were saying is
about
that size, and
US is 25 trillion.
Yes.
And then outside of that, I mean, everything else is like, I think the UK was 3 trillion. I think
Australia was like a little over 1 trillion.
Yeah. There's nothing even close to it really outside of like US and China.
Right.
So it is a massive opportunity. And I think it typically is a very large trading lane for most merchants. And if you're not selling to the EU, you need to.
Well, Germany is 4 trillion of that. France is 3. And Italy's about 2 of that 17.
You know what an interesting stat is, as I look through some of our orders, Germany, France, number 1 and 2. Number 3 is not Italy on the report I'm looking at.
No, it's Netherlands.
It is.
Yeah, it's the Netherlands. Even though Italy's double the size of in GDP, Netherlands is 1 trillion in GDP, which ranked on that list. I mean, I don't have it in order, but I'd imagine it's about 5th or so down the 6th down the list. But it's the 3rd biggest destination for the sellers. But the Netherlands, 90% of the population speaks English. Whereas Italy, it's like 34%.
Yeah.
So I think a lot of it has to do with you're shopping, you're on a US website, and it's in English. So you feel a little more comfortable purchasing. I mean, see, France isn't that much bigger than the Netherlands, but in GDP it is. It's like 3x, but it's not 3x in terms of the percent of business of a company. So I think that high percentage of English speaking definitely proportionately makes it a great destination to go to.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. Well, okay, so let's talk a little bit about the EU. You mentioned it. They use the same tariff system, which means an HS code to Germany is the same as an HS code to France, etc. So it's pretty straightforward to sell.
If the HS code's the same, is the duty the same then too?
The duty is the same too. Yep. So when it comes to land cost calculations, it's the same, right? As far as the duty rate is concerned.
Right.
You do get different things with different carrier fees and different things that may happen with some of the countries, but a lot of those are unified too. VAT rates are different, as you mentioned. The interesting thing, though, is a lot has changed. If we go back in the last 3 or 4 years, a lot of things have transpired. In fact, it was a few years ago. There was a lot going on in the EU because they had an old friend that left.
Yeah.
Right. I don't think we need a moment of silence or celebration, depending on which side of the line you're on. But no, I think the UK leaving was a massive disruption to that market.
Yeah, it was.
And that happened all at the same time as rolling out IOSS and other things, all within really that same year.
Well, the export volume out of the UK just plummeted because of the complications now selling outside the UK and also into the UK as well.
Well, and I think there's a lot of a lot of companies that were selling within the EU, and obviously the UK was a big part of their business, and they really didn't venture outside of that. To them, it was like a domestic sale. They just kind of sold within the EU, and they didn't do a lot of cross-border outside of the EU. And so when the UK left, all of a sudden there was a ton of businesses having to deal with this cross-border complexity that they didn't really deal with before. It'd be like us selling to California, and all of a sudden California became a cross-border destination.
Okay, so
right?
so now that it's a cross-border destination, what are the rules now, right? Like you're now in the UK, you're selling to the EU. They weren't having to worry about it before. Now what do they have to worry about? Like talk to me a little bit about like the de minimis and now the rollout of IOSS and how that correlated with the rollout of UK VAT.
Yeah. So this is now all of a sudden you've got to do all the commercial paperwork, the commercial invoice, and you got to have HS code.
So before it just needed, wasn't going through customs.
Nope, wasn't going through customs at all. Duties all of a sudden started applying, and so there was a lot of things that companies started to have to deal with. And this really impacts UK companies selling into the EU, right? And vice versa. And then at the same time, they're rolling out these low-value tax laws. The UK low-value tax law came out within 6 months of IOSS.
Which one came first?
I think it was the UK.
Okay.
Yeah, I think the UK rolled theirs out first, If I'm wrong,
Well, they
on
had
that,
to.
correct me in the comments.
Yeah, they had a deadline.
But I know, I know there was one rolled out the first of the year, the other one rolled out in the summer. So, but the interesting thing is they took different approaches. The UK, you could tell they're kind of in a rush. And they basically said, well, we'll just use all the tax systems we've got in place. We'll just make everybody have to remit tax to us no matter what, which has been a bit clunky and
less pain for us, more pain for you.
Now let's talk about the EUs. That's what we're talking about here is selling into Europe. IOSS took a different approach. You can tell they've been working on this one for a little longer. I actually really like some of the things they did with IOSS. They made it optional. This is the only one I know of that's like that. It's most of the other ones are obligatory.
And then the other ones just Australia, New Zealand, and we talked about another podcast, but there's a lot of other ones. So this is the only one that you've seen that right now is optional.
Yeah, whereas it's you don't have to use it all if you don't want to, no matter who you are. Whereas the other ones say, no, you have to if you're selling more than this. And there may be some different rules for marketplaces, or I won't really talk to on it. But the idea is, hey, this is an advantage. It's more of a carrot than a stick in encouraging people to use it. And some of the advantages are just faster customs clearance, creating a better experience overall, and cutting down on carrier fees that are naturally going to happen if they have to be the ones managing the duty.
So why is the cut? Why is it a faster customs experience?
There's no duty and tax to collect or anything. It can get kind of green lighted. You see an IOSS number
because it's under the de minimis duty, right?
Yeah. So let's talk through what changed.
Okay.
This is in 2021. Prior to that, they had a VAT de minimis of 22 euro, and then they had a duty de minimis of 150 euro. They just said, forget it. We're going to charge VAT on everything. The 150 euro on for the duty de minimis remain, which means anything over 150 euro, that's when duty kicks in. Anything below that, you don't have to.
22 is eliminated. Now we just have the 150 de minimis on duty.
Now the question is, how do you want the VAT to get paid?
Right.
Is it let the carrier?
That's the optional part.
Deal with it. That's the optional part. They're going to have fees to be able to facilitate that payment, or sign up for IOSS. They made a simple system. Put your IOSS number on, and then just
they'll let it go through because there's no collection. There's going to be less cost associated with it because now you can just pay the VAT versus paying the VAT plus a fee for whoever's having to collect it individually on that shipment from you.
You got it. And now to do it, you have to know all the different tax rates.
Yeah.
And you got to be able to know which orders are below 150 euro, which ones are above, and you have to have a representative in the EU representing you.
But how much am I honestly saving if why not still just get billed? Like, really, am I going to save that much money? But if
I don't know. Do you have some of the carrier fees listed out?
I don't today. I know what they are.
They're expensive.
Yeah. They're going to be anywhere probably from if I was using euros on the low end, 15 euro probably. I would say.
Yeah.
And on the high end, 25 euro. And per shipment.
And it makes sense. They're taking on risk. They're advancing the duty and tax money to customs on your behalf, and then turning around and either billing you or collecting.
Yeah, what if you don't pay it?
Else. If you don't pay it, I mean, so it's a real service, so they have to charge for it. Versus if you take on that responsibility yourself to remit directly, they don't have to deal with it. So
you do 10 shipments a month. That's over $100 a month.
Yeah,
which is that's a significant amount, and going to really hurt your conversion or it's going to hurt your pocketbook. One of the two, right?
Yep. Now, one thing that was with IOSS. This is where we call it optional, but there's they changed some stuff and some rules in the way things were cleared that actually forced the hand of some of the carriers out there. It used to be that you could have kind of a single point of clearance into any country, into the EU, and once you're into that market, then away you go.
Like you go into the Netherlands, right?
Yeah, go through the Netherlands to access the rest of the world, and then customs clearance could happen there. But they changed the name of the game a bit with IOSS. And you have to clear in the destination country. So what this did is there was a lot of these consolidators out there that are like, well, that doesn't make sense for us.
So they can only do IOSS.
Yeah.
For them.
So they force their shippers to do IOSS.
Yes.
Because now
they have no ability to do.
Yep. And it's just not cost effective for them to try to build out a network.
Right.
Now the express carriers and others can manage that. But
but
an IOSS works so well.
That makes sense.
They really they said, if you want to ship with us, get an IOSS.
Okay, but what if it goes above the de minimis? What is a consolidator doing? Can they still do?
The rules are a little different.
Okay.
Yeah. So they can still do the status quo.
So if you're a Landmark or an Ascendia, and you now have shipments that are okay. So they have mixed shipments, right? They're gonna have some that are under 150 euros, some that are over 150. They'll probably pick the Netherlands. It's a pretty popular destination to clear into. If it's under the 150, they don't have to worry about it because you're going to worry about it. You're going to be willing paying the IOSS, the VAT. And then if it's over the amount, then it's all going through that one destination, one customs clearance.
Yeah,
know,
kind of status quo for what they've always done. Yep.
But when it is above, they do collect the VAT from you with the duty, correct?
Yep.
So
so IOSS is not available above 150 euro.
Are there other countries where it is available above the de minimis to pay the VAT?
You mean outside of the EU?
Yeah. Where you have like the option to do the remittance. I thought there was a country we talked about, but maybe
there's some that give you the option. Yeah, they give you some options to do some creative things, and like I want to say New Zealand has some different rules that you can do. Singapore lets you elect some different ways to do it, but it's,
okay. But pretty standard. I mean, once you're above the threshold, the VAT and the duty is going to get collected by the broker or your carrier from you.
Yep. So now the question is, I got a pop quiz for you on statistics here.
Okay. I'm not ready for this.
And this basically 150 euros kind of equal to the UK's, and the numbers actually all line up, but what percentage of e-com shipments, and I'm looking at our customer base, which is across a lot of different shippers, selling a lot of different kind of products, but we're talking just B2C e-commerce. What percentage of shipments going into the EU are under 150 euro and eligible for IOSS, and what percentage are over?
Let me ask some clarifying questions. Is the 150 euro, and with IOSS, is it FOB or CIF? Is it based
FOB, just the
value of the goods? Just the value of the goods.
Just the value of the goods.
All right. Well, I do know that 150 is actually pretty close to our average product value. It's actually, I know it in USD, it's, but so knowing that that's the average, my guess is going to be 65%.
That's low. It's
really?
higher than that. Yeah, it is 76%. It's over 76%. So over 3/4 of your shipments can go IOSS for most shippers.
Okay. So
if you have a lot of low value goods, obviously that's higher. If you have a lot of high value shipments, then it's going to be lower. But on average, over 3/4 of the e-com shipments going to the EU are actually remitted via IOSS.
So if I didn't want to deal with any customs, I could just say, hey, you have to order everything has to be under 150 euro. I could just do IOSS and I'd still get 76% of my orders, maybe.
Yeah.
I'm not.
I don't know why you would do that,
but I do know.
Yeah.
We see a lot of people do some strange things, but I don't know why you do that either.
Yeah. So that's actually, it makes sense when you start thinking about it, but that's the target, right? They want to streamline tax collection on these low value orders, and it's worked out really well for them. And I know there's rumblings and things are going to evolve with IOSS. I think they're going to start making certain things mandatory, and there's even talk of raising the value and allowing more remittance to happen in the future. So stay tuned on that. But
so you're telling me IOSS isn't going away?
No,
but I was told, but Aaron,
going to be expanded.
I remember, and I will not name the person, someone that was a very prominent influencer in a logistical space that was very loud about how terrible IOSS is and that it wasn't going to stick around, right? So that,
Yep. But it's going to expand over the coming years. I will say, look, I've been very positive on IOSS. There are some downsides to it that some gotchas you have to watch out for, and double taxation is one of them. When you collect tax at checkout and put your IOSS number on it, customs then has to recognize that and not collect tax, right? So now you have two different ways of doing it. Yep. They have to recognize which way you're doing it. And sometimes they just flat screw up. And next thing you know, they're trying to collect from the consignee at delivery. It doesn't happen a lot, but it still happens. And you have to be able to watch to be able to rectify that when it does happen. And the way to rectify it, you have to then decide, am I going to fight with the carrier to try to say don't collect and get the money back from them? Or I can actually use it as a credit on my next remittance.
Yep.
And that's usually and pay the carrier and then go and
that's
take
gross.
it out of the next remittance.
Yeah.
But yeah.
What's an example where you think double taxation doesn't happen, and why? Why would it be different to another low value tax country? Like, what's a good way to solve this problem?
Well, an easy way is if you look at Australia, for example, it's the de minimis. It's either everything under that.
Yep.
Customs has the same procedure. They don't collect anything. They just assume it's all based on someone remitting. And if it's over that, they know it's their job and they take it and run with it.
So the trade-off was, hey, I'm going to make this optional. That's great. But the trade-off to optional is a problem, which is possible double taxation because it's optional.
Right.
It's not just one standard rule.
And it's getting better. Like in the beginning, I think you saw a lot more double taxation as everyone was trying to figure it out. And I think your more developed countries within the EU, you see it less. And then you've got some that are, it's still pretty manual at customs clearance. It's not this magic in the sky automated system. It's there's people involved and they can make mistakes and you just have to be able to watch for those when they happen. But it's getting pretty rare now, but it still happens.
So, Aaron, I'm sold. I want to do IOSS. Now what? Like, how do I do this? I mean, we can talk about what we do, and I think that's important. But like,
if you want to do it on your own, and we do have some docs on how to do this on your own on our website, on docs.zonos.com. But you have to get someone to represent you,
fiscal representative.
An intermediary to represent you.
What is this person? What does that even mean?
The EU wants someone local to be held responsible.
Okay, so they're taking on liability for being your representative.
Yep.
How much liability? What if you don't pay the tax?
Yeah, I think in the end, it falls back on them. The EU is going to come after them because it's going to be difficult for them to go after foreign entities. So
and these are, these services are, they're not cheap. I mean, they're not like outrageously expensive, but just for tax remittance, they can get a little costly.
And it'll be cheaper than the carrier fees if you want to.
Oh yeah.
You know what I mean? It's still a better route than that. But no, you have to work with a partner, and they'll help guide you through the process to help get registered and give you an IOSS number, and then you need to put that IOSS number on the shipment, and away you go. And then you have to track all your cells, and know which ones are below 150 euro, which ones are not, and make sure you're collecting the right VAT. And then
when you say you're collecting the right VAT, that's on the seller to
at checkout.
At checkout to determine what's the right VAT rate, calculate it correctly, and then put that on the statement that then goes to the fiscal representative. Or the fiscal representative, are they sending their orders to the fiscal representative, and the fiscal representative, kind of like with U.S. sales tax, right? Like they then say, okay, well, you owe this much. Or is there a little bit of both going on?
You're reporting to them.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. And there's some different ways to automate that process, but they need the data and know what they're responsible for. So
now I've my fiscal rep. How often am I paying?
It's monthly.
Okay. So
I got that right? There's some are monthly, some are
monthly, some are quarterly.
Sure,
dude, I actually don't know. We have people that know.
Yes. Regularly.
Yeah. All right. And then you have foreign exchange in this too, right? Like, so you're either...
And that's where it can go back to double taxation. You might use an exchange rate that says it's 149 euro, but then when it gets to customs, they think it's 151. Right. And then you thought it was IOSS. It gets there and they say, no, this isn't IOSS.
Hey, two things could be true. You both could be right.
Exactly.
It could have been when you got the order, it was that, and then it changed.
Yep.
Yeah, then all that's
IOSS is still worth doing. And that's where you talk about our solution. Our customers were involved at the checkout. And so we actually, you sign up with us and it actually all goes under our IOSS number. And so we help you. Yep. We do all the calculations. We deal with all the double taxation problems. We tell you what to collect.
We're getting the paperwork right for you. We're doing all of that.
Yep.
There's a lot more going on than just a fiscal representative in the background, right? It's a fully integrated, ready to go solution. And then when it goes over, it's the same experience for you. You're still just paying us for now, in this case, the tax and the duty, the VAT and the duty. And it's the amount that we just calculated at checkout. We just guarantee the amount that we calculated. We show you how we calculated it. You can check it. And that's how it works.
Yep.
Pretty simple, straightforward. Anything more on IOSS that you really wanted to?
Nothing burning right now.
Okay.
No.
So, what about some trade agreements into Are you familiar with some off the top of your head? Is that super impactful? I know there's a couple countries it's one of the few places, and I forget the trade agreement that we do, we support every trade agreement. We just don't calculate every trade agreement because most people aren't using them.
Yeah, no, I mean, like post-Brexit, they had to rush and put a trade agreement in place there between the UK and the EU. And so there's a trade agreement there. Canada, I think, has a trade agreement with everybody in the world, including the EU. They're very trade friendly. But yeah, there's a lot of different trade agreements going to the EU from the Asia countries, et cetera. And honestly, the big one though is that post-Brexit agreement that they put together between the UK and the EU.
Yeah. Well, no, this was super helpful. Anything else before we finish up that's on your mind, not just about IOSS, but shipping to EU in general, whether it's about duties, whether it's about restrictions or anything else? I mean, we have a lot of things on our doc, so I would recommend, if you have any questions on this, we have two things in our docs. We have kind of user guides on how Zonos works. And then we have country guides. And inside of there, we have docs on the European Union, some of the countries, and you can dive into a lot of the details on, like you said, doing the registration. Like there's a lot that we've.
Yeah, I honestly, the only other thing I can think of is it is a little unique. With every other country we've talked about on our other podcasts, it's like, hey, you go to Canada or you're going to the UK. We're kind of grouping the EU together as if it's one country, but it's still not. There's many different cultures, a lot of different languages, and there's different currencies within the EU. too.
Right.
Most of them are euro, but there is some other currencies out there. And so just knowing how to navigate all of that, understanding the buyer's expectations. So the localization on your website and stuff can make an impact to help convert more sales. And then, the other one, this is where I was going to go. Sorry, I got a little lost in a train of thought. But if you can offer the tax in your product price, that's what they expect over there.
Yeah.
Right. The VAT is included in the price. It doesn't get tacked on after. And so that's where I think that can be impactful selling into the
and that's something else that we do too, right? Mm-hmm. So if, at time of checkout, well, not at time of checkout, during the shopping experience, whether you're on Shopify or elsewhere, we have ways to make sure that you can do VAT inclusive, even duty inclusive. This is good stuff.
Absolutely.
All right. Well, thanks, Aaron.
Thank you.